But we'll get into the Canadian women's national team off the top here. And Canada is back in action this week, of course, with matches against Haiti in Winnipeg and then Montreal, May 31st, this Saturday, and Tuesday, June 3rd. And Alex, Canada comes together under Casey Stoney again in this camp. It's Desiree Scott's farewell. She will play in Winnipeg. She's not expected to play in Montreal. But what can we expect for this Canadian team? Of course, Ashley Lawrence is out. Bianca St. George comes into the squad as well.
Yeah, this is just going to be a good test. I think Haiti, what I've liked from Casey Stoney's preparation is that she's targeted different teams. Haiti's going to be different than Argentina. That's going to be different from what China and Chinese Taipei and Mexico offered. I'm sure when the occasion arises, she'll try to get some European games. I know those European teams can be busy, and I think this is just great because you're getting a new style of play, and immediately you're seeing what it looks like against maybe a more athletic team, a more defensive team, a more attack-minded team. This Haiti team kind of seems somewhere, they're a good test. We'll dive into them shortly in this, but I think for Canada, they'll get a chance to inform themselves about more of what Stony Ball is about.
Yeah, and as Stoney pointed out in the press conference when she announced the team, it's good that they have a variation of tests in this kind of strange lead-in period to the Stoney era. You want to have as much variation as possible. So I think it was good planning on their part. And then, again, to reiterate from last week, the fact that they get to give Desiree Scott her flowers. I'm really happy that it came together that way.
And of course, so there's players like Olivia Smith that come into this camp off strong European seasons. We saw the women's European seasons largely come to a close over the weekend as well. When you look at this group of players that come into this Canadian team, Brendan, who are you most excited to see at this camp, and who do you think can really make their stamp and make this count for them?
We talk about them a lot, but I do think that they're coming in with so much momentum and confidence, and without there being a tournament, that this national team is prepping for this summer or next summer. I think Olivia Smith and Simia Wujo, the sky is the limit for the two of them, and that's a cliche we like to throw around a lot. But Simia Wujo seemed electric at that 7v7's Manchester United tournament. When healthy, has done very, very well there. Everyone around that club seemed to speak so highly of Simia Wujo, and look, we've talked about Olivia Smith at length as someone who has a real potential here to be a global superstar, and very, very quickly has become a Canadian superstar. So the two of them get me very excited, and the fact that there isn't a pressure here to really. There isn't even a pressure on Stoney's part to experiment. It's just kind of, let the players kind of dictate things. And those two have been dictating a lot. And I'm excited to see them do it in a Canada shirt again.
What do you think of that 7v7 tournament as well? It seemed to just kind of pop up, and it was this kind of fun event, but all of these top players and top European teams playing. Meanwhile, Arsenal goes and wins the Women's Champions League in an epic final against Barcelona. But the 7v7 tournament with all these best players, it was kind of cool.
I enjoyed it. Like, I actually tuned into that final just to kind of see what it was all about. And Simia Wujo, great to see it score. A bit heartbreaking that Bayern kind of snatched it away from Man United. Tough week for Man United men's, women's, sevens. Everyone's just, it's not a good week for them. But cool idea in terms of engagement and actually getting the stars, right? We've seen how successful TST has been with, a lot of retired, maybe pros that are not at a high enough level, right? Or, guys maybe past their primes. It was cool to see like some of the tops players in the world out there on the field competing, because it means a lot. There's money on the line. There's bragging rights. Always love to see fun tournaments like that come about.
I think it's really smart because for as fast as the club game has grown, the women's club game has grown in Europe in the last few years, there's still, I think, a gap between the women's audience that's consuming international play and kind of where the women's international game is in the grand landscape of world soccer. This allows these star players for their clubs to get some attention and get some spotlight with their club shirt on in ways that you just don't don't happen enough. And as we've seen the men's game with how splintered consumption is, DAZN's losing a lot of rights globally to the women's game, including the Champions League in most places, if not everywhere, if I'm not mistaken. That's going to have a big impact on things as well. So the fact, again, that this is not a tournament summer, it seemed like it was well received. And unlike in the men's game, when you add new tournaments and new shenanigans around the game, it seemed like everyone participating really enjoyed themselves. Not only did they think it was good for the sport, but they really liked it. So I think that's very, very positive.
It was certainly fun to tune into some of that over the last week or so. But when you look at this Canadian team, Alex, two matches, of course, we know Desiree Scott is going to probably start in that first game and then get subbed off. Who knows, maybe in the 50th minute or something, and get her round of applause. But when you look at what a best 11 or a starting 11 for that first match could look like, how do you see this Canadian team lining up?
Yeah, I think this will be a good chance for Casey Stoney to see some different, partnerships. I know that's always a big term they look at. Some different combinations. It stands out right away with Lawrence dropping out. That means no Riviera Lawrence. So this is going to be a new chance to see maybe something a bit different at right back. I know up front as well. There's going to be a chance to shake it up. I wrote one out just out of curiosity. I put Kaylin Sheridan in. But of course, I mean, Sabrina D'Angelo's competing. Heck, maybe some Lysiane Prue just wrapped up her first half season, I guess it was, with Juventus. Didn't play much, but she's in the mix. I think Jade Rose will fill in at that right back. Would be nice to see her do so. Vanessa Gilles, Shalina Zadorsky, Gabby Carl. I think the rest of that back four pretty familiar with each other. I think this is a good chance to see more of Emma Reagan, Jessie Fleming. Then moving up to the 3, Janine Sonis on the right. Olivia Smith in the 10, I think, could really work out. And she can also shift out wide. And, I know Casey Stoney said a lot of good things about her defensive game. And then, of course, Mary Yasmin Aladou. And up front, there's some good battles going on. Adriana Leon just had a great game this weekend, which we'll talk about on Canadians Abroad. But then there's a Wujo who can slot in for Emma Regan. So there's a battle brewing there. I'm looking at Julia Grosso can slot in at the 10, and maybe you push Olivia Smith out wide instead of a Sonis, who we've seen a lot of under Stoney. And then, of course, up front, Eveline Vien is back. She scored in that sevens tournament. Sumia Wujo wasn't the only Canadian scoring in those sevens. So it's good to see Vien back. She had a bit of a hamstring problem that kept her out for a while. So that's another battle. So I think Stoney will get a chance to see that 11, and also, most importantly, see some key battles that we just haven't seen due to injuries and absences.
I don't know if it's just us being in the bubble and, paying close attention to the NSL and obviously having a very vested interest in it and wanting to see it be successful off the bat. But I'm really interested to see where Emma Reagan falls into the grand scheme of this team, because it's clear that she's very talented. It's clear that she's a star in the NSL. But I do wonder, where that places her in the national team squad, because let's be honest, there's a gap in quality, there's a gap in experience, and it's still kind of too early to tell how that will impact the team or players that are playing in the varying leagues, where there is a step down or there is a bit of a drop. I don't think that, in this month and a half that we've seen the NSL, I don't think that the gap is as big as you would expect. It certainly isn't as big as the CPL to MLS when the CPL kicked off in 2019, and that's an unfair comparison because it was never going to be that comparatively competitive anyway. But I think that she's going to be more so than someone like Quinn. I think Emma Reagan's going to be the real measuring stick as to where the NSL is and how much of an impact it will have on the Canadian national team, apart from just these windows.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the NSL kind of plays out. Are we going to see it as a stepping stone in the same way that we've seen the CPL, where, guys like Joel Waterman play in the CPL and then go on to a bigger club and then become Canadian national team regulars? Or are we regularly going to see, AFC Toronto, Vancouver Rise on the Canadian national team roster on the women's side? You see what Emma Reagan is able to do, and an absolute banger of a goal that she scored as well against Montreal. Just painted the top corner. One of the best goals you'll see. If you haven't seen it, go check that out on Twitter or wherever you get your NSL highlights. I think she is going to be, as you say, sort of that landmark benchmark for the NSL, but I also think she probably returns to Europe at some point, because I do see the NSL being, in some ways, the CPL of you're not going to have the key players on the national team be in the NSL. Will there be players in the NSL that are on the national team? I think we'll regularly see that, but not key players in the way that I think Emma Reagan has the potential to be over the next few years, Brendan.
Here's what makes that very different, because I agree with that way of thinking, and I do think that applies for Canadian players. For example, if Olivia Smith was 17, she would be playing NSL, I think, and then go to Europe. But most internationals from other countries are coming here at the peak of their career, or they have their heads turned anyway to come in the prime of their career. You look at, I feel horrible here, attempting to mispronounce the name, but AFC Toronto, Esther, the Nigerian international, loads of experience, is probably collecting a paycheck that she wouldn't be able to pull in a lot of European places. Certainly not in Scandinavia, where I believe she was before, somewhat recently. There's a lot of examples. There's quite a few Asian internationals that have said the same thing. Look, we want to be a part of this project. It appeals to our families. It ticks a lot of boxes. Yeah, it ticks a huge money box. And I think that is such an advantage for this league now, where there are players who are making equal to, if not more, than a lot of the players in the English WSL. So that's really going to help the competitive level. I really do think that that's going to be, not the measuring stick, but that's the biggest factor is, do these players feel it's helping their careers and it's as competitive as they need to be to reach the top of their game for both club and country. And I think, unlike the CPL yet, and again, it's not fair to like for like comparison, I think that's what the NSL can really hang its hat on. So it will have a different impact for young Canadian players, but as international players from all over want to play here and raise the level, it's just going to have such a big impact, I think, for the NSL. I truly do.
What we can't forget is that, when the CPL comes in 2019, MLS had been around for 24 years at that point, that European leagues had been around for hundreds of years in some cases. Even the new one, even A-League, right? Some of these newer leagues had still been around for decades at that point. The NSL is coming in where the NWSL is just celebrating its 10th or like 15th anniversary as a league. The WSL officially became the WSL like around a decade ago, after it was a different iteration. And some of these clubs have really only launched in the last 10 years. Canada's in a spot where it also isn't playing as much catch up, and I think that'll show itself when NSL teams are finally allowed into the Women's Champions Cup proper, once they've got over that first year. And you'll see that the gap isn't actually as wild as it might have been for brand new CPL league, and you're going up against Costa Rican teams with 80 years of pedigree. And I think that's something that we forget in all this, is that's why it was so important to launch a women's league, because despite Canada being so far behind where it should have been, it actually wasn't that far behind the rest of the world. And I think the NSL being as good as it's been from day one has kind of proven that theory.
100%.
And Canada, of course, not the only team on the pitch in these friendlies. Haiti as well, and they've got some exciting players within that squad. Melchi Dumornay was just given the 2024-25 UEFA Women's Champions League Young Player of the Season award for scoring 6 goals and 2 assists in Lyon's run to the semifinal, where, of course, they fell to Arsenal, who became champions of Europe on the weekend. But Alex, your scouting report on this Haiti providing the opponent for Canada.
Yeah, Mike mentioned kind of off the top, I think this is a good test. The thing is with Haiti, you saw it over the last few years. It's been a bit of a strange years, right? Because they made the World Cup in 2023. I remember they kind of caused a bit of a surprise in the qualifiers, but that was kind of when people really started to find out about who Dumornay was. I think at the time she was still at Reims and not at Lyon. But then they missed out on the Gold Cup, right? Imagine that. You qualify for the World Cup. You don't even qualify for your own domestic tournament, but still then they're a team with a lot of athleticism across the board, a lot of talented technical players. What stands out is you look at their latest squad from the last window, like over half of it are players playing in Premier League in France. Like a lot of those dual passports have really helped them. We can't forget that Haiti is also, before it was Canada and Haiti were the only teams at the last World Cup without a league. Haiti's still struggling with that, but it is nice that they filled some of that gap that they've left with all those French players. So it's going to be fun. The one of course to watch is Dumornay. Haiti have been playing like a 4-5-1. Dumornay is like the 10, the heartbeat. She's going to be everything. She can score. She can assist. Incredible player. If you get a chance to watch Lyon games, just keep an eye out for her. And I think that'll be a good test for that Canadian midfield to try and shut down a player of her quality.
Yeah, my extensive Haitian research has taken me to the same conclusions.
Of course, those games coming up on Saturday in Winnipeg and, of course, Tuesday in Montreal.